Karoline Leavitt entered the studio prepared to do battle for Donald Trump. When Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett began speaking the truth, though, the live streaming suddenly took an unexpected turn. The red light camera flashed once, then became steady, alerting them they were live. Attention pervaded the atmosphere at the WBTN News studio in San Antonio, Texas. No one had to say it out loud, but everyone felt it. The debate was about to erupt. Tonight's panel was a powder keg, awaiting the smallest spark. Congresswoman Crockett played with her earpiece, maintaining her calm face. Her fingers, however, drummed silently against her coffee mug, betraying the adrenaline flowing through her veins. Across the smooth table, Karoline Leavitt was already positioned, pen in hand, notebook open and ready to spin whatever storm was coming her way. The topic blazing across the screen behind them was simple but loaded: justice or vendetta. The Trump trials divide America. The moderator, Cole Matthews, a lean man in his 40s, typed barely half a sentence into his intro before it started to get warm. Congresswoman Crockett, he began smoothly enough, "You've been very vocal about the words of the previous president that the judicial branch is a rigged game against us. How do you respond to those who say he's merely exercising his right of free speech?" Jasmine did not waste a moment. "Free speech does not cover lies that destroy faith in our courts," she replied, her voice firm. "Even if a former president calls judges criminals with no basis, that is not patriotism. That is sabotage." Karoline's eyes tightened, and she leaned forward a fraction of an inch, a gesture the cameras caught perfectly. "But Jasmine," Karoline interrupted, her smile snapping, "many Americans feel victimized by an unfair system. Donald Trump is voice for millions of people who don't trust institutions anymore. Are you brushing off legitimate complaints?" There was the spin that Karoline was so well known for. Jasmine nodded her head to one side, almost smiling slightly. "Legitimate grievances deserve legitimate solutions," she replied. "Not unsubstantiated accusations that only satisfy one man's ego." The moderator tried to cut in, feeling the tension building, but Jasmine wasn't done. She turned fully to Karoline, her voice cutting through the air, now less polished but more accusatory. "You know what's not fair?" Jasmine's voice rose just a little. "A black teenager in Detroit gets arrested for a charge of petty theft, and a former president who hoarded classified information gets to position himself as the victim. That's not fair." The air in the studio thickened. Even Cole, the host, sat back slightly, giving her space. Karoline was getting ready to say something when Jasmine went on the roll, piling anecdote on hard fact. Cases from Atlanta, Kansas City, Fresno, with a marginalized bore the brunt of a broken system, while elites got away scot-free. Karoline wrote something in a hurry on her pad, trying to keep pace, but the tension hung in the air. Her jaw was tight, and a shake in her hand could be seen by anyone watching. The cameras didn't miss a thing. Behind the back panel, a giant wall screen flickered in real time. Tweets streamed the feed. Crockett is cooking, Leavitt looks shook, and this is history being made. But there was no time to savor the moment. Jasmine knew how quickly public opinion could shift. She kept her focus sharp. "I'm not here to make people comfortable," Jasmine declared, staring directly into the camera. "I'm here to tell the truth, even when it's ugly." The crew, sensing the moment, zoomed in. Her face filled millions of screens across the country. Karoline shifted, clearing her throat, her TV polish cracking for a moment. A bead of sweat ran down her temple, catching the harsh lights. Cole glanced over at her anxiously. He knew the routine. Ask another question, keep rolling, but he stalled. In that moment of hesitation, Jasmine took complete control of the room. Stealing herself closer to the mic, her voice dropped slightly. "We have two choices," Jasmine said, her tone measured. "Let falsehood win or rise up and call them out, no matter where they're from." The studio audience, as well as throughout the country, seemed to take a collective breath. Karoline stiffened her back, gritting a tight smile, the kind politicians wear when they're bleeding on the inside but can't let it show. She tapped her pen twice on the table, her fingers giving away her otherwise calm facade. Congresswoman, she started cautiously, you speak of truth, but what about the thousands of Americans who feel their voices are not heard, who think the justice system has become a tool against those who hold opposing views? Jasmine didn't flinch. She crossed her arms over herself instead, watching Karoline with a teacher's patience as she waits for the student to notice their mistake. They feel disregarded, Jasmine repeated slowly again, because for the first time, repercussions are affecting people who thought they were too good. A few murmurs bubbled through the studio audience, against the rules but inevitable. Karoline pushed forward. You're defending a system that locks up regular Americans while letting criminals roam free because of political bias. Jasmine's lips twisted, not with humor, but rather with a look bordering on sorrow. You mean, she said, voice gaining strength, like Brock Turner was allowed to sit in jail for 3 months for raping a woman, but a kid in Tulsa sat for 5 years for swiping a backpack? Karoline blinked at her surprise. And political bias is what you wish to talk about. Jasmine continued. You mean the bias that lets white-collar crimes steal billions from working families with hardly a slap on the wrist? Karoline's fingers tapped out a nervous beat under the table, out of sight of most of the cameras, but one over-enthusiastic cameraman caught her. A rush zoom that would go viral in the next few hours. Cole Matthews pushed papers around, struggling to regain control of the feed, but neither woman gave him a chance. I'm not here to be a victim, Jasmine continued. I'm here to show you what real patriotism is, and that is speaking the truth when it hurts, not when it's convenient. Karoline leaned back in her chair, flushed, her mouth opening and closing. You actually believe this? She snapped with a cold edge. Or are you just acting for the cameras? The words circulated around the room like thick smoke. Jasmine did not waver. I know because I lived it. My family has lived it. My community lives it every day. There was a stifling, unyielding silence after that. Karoline glanced sideways at Cole, as if looking for support, but received none. Jasmine edged forward, her voice even but cutting. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about the children languishing in Rikers Island for months on end without trial because they couldn't afford bail. Let's talk about the people gunned down during traffic stops because they looked suspicious. The studio atmosphere seemed to warm 10 degrees. Lights seemed turned up. Karoline's breathing grew thinner, shorter. She turned yet another sheet in her documents, attempting once again to retake control, but momentum was broken. Social media hashtags in which things were currently trending involved already. Hashtag Crockett clapback. Hashtag truth hurts. Hashtag Karoline fumbles. The earpiece in the moderator's ear crackled, and producers in the rear were frantically trying to decide whether to cut away to a commercial. But ratings were climbing. Viewership was growing faster than it had in months. They wrote it out. Karoline gripped the arms of her chair, croakily declaring, Americans deserve better than politicians tearing each other down on TV. Jasmine cocked her head to one side, pitying her halfway. Americans are superior to being governed by those who will deceive them to hold on to power, she replied. The studio, rigidly no clapping controlled, buzzed with suppressed mutters, tapping feet, a cough, silenced by a whisker of a whistle. Karoline blinked furiously, trying to restore her vision, her face gray in the lights. She reached for her water, but her hand trembled and the glass smashed. Everyone flinched at the noise. A production assistant hastily stepped forward to clean it up, but Jasmine did not budge. Her gaze stayed on Karoline, reading each ripple of tension like an open book. If telling the truth is going to sound like an attack, Jasmine responded, icy but incisive. Then maybe you should wonder why it hurts. Karoline's hand froze on her notebook. The moderator cleared his throat, trying to steer the conversation back to more reassuring ground. Let's return to the bigger picture, he said. Congresswoman, can you give us specific examples of how this supposedly broken system affects everyday Americans today? It was a gentle pitch, the sort politicians adore. But Jasmine did not take the short route. She leaned forward, elbows securely dug into the desk, and began, Let me tell you about Corey Monroe. He was 19 years old, arrested in Bakersfield for a crime he didn't do. No lawyer fees. spent 16 months in jail waiting to be tried. Evidence finally cleared him, but not before he had lost his scholarship, his apartment, and his mother's trust. The studio went quiet. Even the sound techs in the back stopped in their tracks. Or take Lila Watkins in Fort Smith. Jasmine continued. 52 years old, wrongfully evicted because the brother of her landlord was a city official. It took her 7 years and 3 courts to be granted justice. And by that point, she'd already lost everything. These are not random events, Jasmine said. They're trends, and individuals are tired of pretending otherwise. Karoline drew in small gasps, her chest expanding and contracting with rapid rhythm. She clutched her pen again, but seemed lost in an instant of forgetfulness about exactly what she wanted to write. Nationally, people sat glued to their screens, televisions, phones, tablets, watching, whispering, passing along. Jasmine was not only dominating the debate, she was unveiling years of seared hurt, and no one knew how to look away. The moderator, getting hot under the collar, tried one more time. But surely you realize that many Trump voters perceive the system to be against them, too? Jasmine's laugh was short, laced with bitterness. Sure, she said, everyone feels oppressed when they have to play by the same rules as everyone else at last. Karoline interrupted, her voice shattering the fleeting silence. You're bringing this up in terms of race. Jasmine didn't hesitate. I'm making this about reality, she said, her voice calm, measured, and undeniable. It hit harder than any shout could have. Karoline shook her head, blinking rapidly. She reached for her water again, but missed the glass, knocking it over. The crash made everyone flinch. A production assistant quickly ran out to mop up the spill, but Jasmine remained jammed, staring at Karoline, waiting to see what she would do next. The air in the room was thick with tension. Karoline tried again, opening her mouth to speak, but there was nothing. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, Karoline Leavitt toppled over to the side, crashing against the table. Everyone gasped in sync. Crew members rushed into action. Jasmine rose slowly, unsure whether to move forward or stay in the back. Her instincts battled between concern and disbelief. The live feed continued to display breaking news logos as chaos erupted in front of millions of viewers. Jasmine stood there, motionless for a moment, heart pounding, but it was not fear, something thicker. A medic came in, and Karoline was at once loaded onto a stretcher. Jasmine at last stepped back, letting her microphone fall, catching Cole's eye for an instant, not knowing what to do next. Producers panicked, cutting off the broadcast, but the damage was done. Clips flooded Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. The moment was already out into the world. Karoline passes out on live TV. Bombshells are dropped by Jasmine Crockett. And then this, the evening political spectacle got too real. Outside the studio, a dozen or so protesters, who had been standing quietly, now buzzed with new life. Reporters ran toward the glass windows, cameras aloft inside. Jasmine wrapped her jacket tighter around herself and tried to steady her breathing. Cole finally spoke up between them. You didn't do anything wrong. He breathed, softly enough that only she could hear. I know, Jasmine replied, but her voice wasn't as firm as it usually was. One of the producers, a wiry woman named Tanya Clark, came over quickly. We need you to stick around for debrief, she said quickly. Legal's already on the phone. Jasmine nodded. What else could she do? A studio assistant had given her a water bottle. She had drunk from it, set it full on the table, and left it alone. Outside the glass walls, the sun began to fall, painting the parking lot with burnt orange hues, a strange contrast to the cold storm that boomed inside. Karoline's stretcher disappeared through the side doors, surrounded by paramedics and flashing red lights. No one said anything for so long. Then Jasmine glanced at Cole again. Are they going to blame me? She said, softer now. He opened his lips, shut them, then said finally, probably. They both knew it was true, because truth, no matter how politely expressed, always costs something. Jasmine glanced into the dressing room mirror as producers rushed past her. Her makeup, still in decent shape, couldn't hide the weariness from her eyes. She didn't regret what she'd said. She never would. But tonight, She knew people didn't just despise the truth. They despised the person who had the courage to speak it. But outside of that studio, America wasn't yet finished reacting, and neither was Jasmine. Before Jasmine stepped out of the studio, the world had already changed. The parking lot, once half empty, was now congested with news vans, microphones, and flashing lights. Reporters inserted recorders in the faces of anyone who was wearing a studio badge. Supporters and protesters struggled at the barricades, screaming over each other. Jasmine pulled her jacket tight towards the night breeze and bent down, being walked by two of the network's security guards. She picked up bits of chat every 2 steps. She destroyed them tonight. Dude, did you notice Karoline? She just dropped on the floor. She must be ashamed going that hard against her. Battle narratives were already brewing. Jasmine sensed it, not just in the words, but in the look that individuals gave her direction, some full of admiration, others full of thinly veiled distaste. Her phone was buzzing in her pocket, steadily texts, calls, and mentions accumulating by the thousands. She slipped into a waiting black SUV on the curb. Once the door closed, she reached for her phone. First message, you killed it, hold on. Second, the vultures are flying, prepare. Third, they're saying you orchestrated it. Jasmine glared at that one a little harder. Orchestrated, as if she somehow instigated another adult woman's breakdown. She tossed the phone onto the seat beside her, slapping the heels of her hands into her eyes. For a moment, exhaustion crept into her bones. The driver, a quiet woman with a buzz cut and piercing eyes, glanced over at her in the rearview mirror. Turn on the radio, she asked. Jasmine shook her head. No, I already know what they're saying. But even without radio, she could not shut it out. In homes from Seattle to Jacksonville, families were fighting over dinner tables. Hashtags clashed on social media. Hashtag Snatch Justice Speaks versus hashtag Media Assault. In a small restaurant somewhere past Flagstaff, Arizona, an old man banged his cup of coffee on the table and growled. That Crockett woman. She spoke the truth that was needed to speak. In the suburbs of Boise, Idaho, a woman flipped off the news, furious. It's bullying. That's what it is. Bullying. And in the city, in Albuquerque, in a one-bedroom apartment, a college student stared at the broken screen of her phone, crying. Not because she was angry, but because for the first time, she felt heard. Jasmine did not personally know these people. She didn't have to. Their answers would decide her fate. She finally broke her silence, her voice low and raspy from the hours of fighting and adrenaline. Can you just drive for a while? She said to the driver, with nowhere to go. Just drive. The SUV took to the road, merging into traffic. San Antonio's cityscape glimmered ahead of them, unaware of what had transpired overnight. Somewhere behind her, Karoline was probably in a hospital bed, with medics and reporters swarming around her like fragile glass. Was she sorry? The thought intruded unwanted. Jasmine squashed it. She hadn't been dishonest. She hadn't failed. She'd told the truth. And if the truth broke people, maybe it wasn't her doing. Maybe it was a sign they'd never been strong enough to get through it. The driver headed down the highway west, and city lights faded into the distance. Jasmine closed her eyes, surrounded for a moment by the hum of the engine and the darkness of the road, a warm blanket. Her phone vibrated once more. Her chief of staff this time. We need to talk tomorrow morning. It's more than we expected. Bigger. Always bigger. Jasmine set the telephone aside without response. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know that by speaking up, she had drawn a line that could not be erased. A line America could no longer ignore. But the real fight wasn't going to be fought in a studio or on social media. It was coming, and it was coming hard. By the next morning, Jasmine's name was on all front pages, not just in political circles, not just in activist communities. She was on the front page. Cable shows ran the clip of Karoline collapsing over and over, each network taking the moment to mean whatever they wanted it to mean. Some painted Jasmine as a heroine who would never flinch. Others painted her as a villain who pushed too hard and lost all sense of human decency. The truth didn't seem to matter anymore. The narrative had already split in two. Jasmine sat at a wooden table in a small cafe on the east side of San Antonio, away from the glossy chain spots. Her chief of staff, Dana Rowe, slid into the seat across from her, setting down a battered laptop and a manila folder stuffed with papers. "You're trending #1, Dana said without looking up. "Congratulations," Jasmine snapped back. Dana finally lifted her head, eyes serious. "It's not all good," Dana went on. Jasmine crossed her arms, leaned back. She'd had minimal sleep, the dark circles under her eyes sharp enough to slice paper. "They're organizing protests," Dana said. "Not on the internet, real ones. Outside your office. Outside the next town halls. Some are demanding that you resign." Jasmine stared out the window for a long time, watching as the morning light struggled through the clouds. "I did not get her to fall over," she said quietly. "I told the truth." Dana shut the laptop quietly. "You did, and that is why they're afraid." The waitress walked by with coffee and a tight, sympathetic smile. Jasmine indicated the refill. As the waitress departed, Dana leaned in close. "This is no longer about Karoline," Dana said to her. "It's about power. Who gets to speak? Who gets to be heard? They're scared because you didn't ask permission." Jasmine unfolded her napkin deliberately. "So what? I'm supposed to apologize for winning a fight they started." Dana shook her head. "No, but you need to be a wise thinker about how you move forward next." Across the cafe, a television above the counter flickered another headline. "Crockett won't apologize despite outcry." They aired a clip of hers from last night, looping her most determined expression. "Good," Jasmine muttered. "Let them see it." Dana hesitated. "You sure? We could put out a statement. Something softer, show some concern." Jasmine looked at her straight. "I'm concerned about the people who never get heard because we're too busy coddling liars." Dana sat back, studying her. "You know," Dana said after a long moment, "most politicians would backpedal right now. Throw out some half-hearted apology, blame stress, play the sympathy card." "I'm not most politicians," Jasmine said. "No," Dana said, a small smile forming. "You're not." For the first time today morning, Jasmine felt the spark of return of strength. Maybe it was stupid, maybe it was obstinate, but it was there. She put the coffee cup aside and had her coffee. "If they require a fight," Jasmine stood up, "they'll get it." Outside, in the morning streets surrounding the cafe, the early morning workers crowded. There were some that recognized her and glared, some that spoke under their breath. One man in a paint-splattered sweatshirt gave her a thumbs up without slowing down. Dana gathered her things, following Jasmine out the door. As they emerged, a young woman with a stroller slammed on the brakes. She looked young, maybe late 20s, worn out in the strange way only mothers are. She gazed at Jasmine for a moment too long, then said almost shyly, "Thanks for saying something many of us can't." Jasmine smiled, sincerely this time. "Thanks for listening," she said. The woman nodded and went on her way, disappearing into the crowd. Dana drew in closer as they walked toward the car. "That's why you can't back down," she said. "You're not fighting just for yourself anymore." Jasmine had already surmised the lines had been drawn and the price for speaking truth had been set. She just needed to decide if she would be paying it. But Jasmine was not going to be the only one making decisions. The entire country was about to be forced to take a side. 3 days later, Jasmine Crockett was on the steps of the Santa Fe Federal Courthouse in New Mexico. She was not supposed to be there. She was not supposed to give any speech. No media crew had installed a teleprompter. But word gets around on the internet that she might appear, and hundreds showed up just in case. Some carried homemade signs. "Truth matters, stand tall, justice for all." Others waited silently. Jasmine looked out at the crowd, her heart thudding the way it had when she used to give impromptu speeches on live television. She didn't like being a symbol. She didn't want to be. She wanted to tell stories that were worth telling, even if it hurt, particularly if it hurt. Dana pushed a small microphone into her hand, which was attached to briefcase-sized speakers. Jasmine took it, feeling the chilled metal dig into her palm. She was quiet for an instant. The crowd was holding its breath. And then, finally, Jasmine raised her head and said, not with the fire of the panel, not with the razor edge of confrontation, but with something softer, something more profound. "I did not come here to make headlines," she said to them. "I came here because too many people spend their lives being told to sit down, be quiet, make themselves small, so other people can stay comfortable. A chill ran through the group. I know some people think I pushed too hard the other night. I know some are upset, afraid. She let the words hang in the air. And that's fine. Fear means change is coming. One woman in the front row swiped a tear off her cheek. A young man held up his phone to film. I didn't bring anyone's house down, Jasmine went on, her voice calm. But if the truth brings down a system based on deception, perhaps it should fall. The crowd didn't yell, they didn't chant. They just stood a little taller. Jasmine allowed the silence to fill the space between them. Sometimes silence said more than screaming ever could. She thought of Karoline, the way her body had twisted under pressure, the endless headlines that followed. She wished her nothing but ill, but she wished even more for people to stop confusing discomfort with injustice. You don't have to like me, Jasmine answered. You don't have to agree with me. But you do have to face the truth, no matter if that truth benefits your politics or not. In the back, a small boy who sat on his dad's shoulders applauded softly. Other people stood and joined him, at first nervously, then louder. The applause went on, not a roar, but a soft cadence like a heartbeat. Jasmine smiled, wetting the microphone. Dana came back around her again, eyes raised in silent question. Ready for whatever comes next? Jasmine infinitesimally nodded. She was ready, because standing up wasn't about fighting the trivial battles. It was about withstanding the hurricanes. Afterward, as the crowd began to disperse, people came up one by one. No cameras, no grandstanding, just quiet moments. A woman in scrubs pressed Jasmine's hand between hers and whispered, "You gave us permission to speak." An older man with deep wrinkles tipped his baseball cap and said, "Keep going. We're listening." Each word built a bridge. Each touch rebuilt something she hadn't even realized was breaking inside her. Later that night, alone in her hotel room, Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, reading texts. Hate arrived, indeed, threats, accusations, lies. But there was more as well, stories. True ones. Stories from the people who had been silent too long, but were now gathering the courage to speak. Jasmine leaned back against the headboard, fatigue pulling at her, but a fierce, stubborn hope burning somewhere deep inside. She knew something, no breakdown, no smear campaign, no headline could take it away. Telling the truth will cost you something, but silence costs even more. And no matter how hard they tried to push, no matter how much it hurt, she wasn't going to pay the price of silence. Not anymore. If you believe in standing tall for truth, even when it gets tough, then subscribe to more stories that get to the bottom, challenge the noise, and stand up for what is real.